you don't pretend.
No, it's exhausting to pretend. I did pretend for a while. It was exhausting.
We all try.
Yeah, no. And I think it's just part of getting older. The older you get, the more authentic you get, because you're like, I'm just tired.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Beck.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Beck is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven, professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Christine is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Christine and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
Test 1, 2. Yes, there are those green bars. Okay. Come into the center with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm here.
There we go. I like a bit of symmetry.
I'm going to bounce in. I really enjoy this couch a lot.
It's taking every bone in my body to not say, hello, my beautiful friends.
But it's great when you see it. I love when she says it.
Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back to our channel and a completely new, exciting addition to the channel. So a lot of you probably already know Dr. Christine Barker.
Hi guys, I'm Christine. So I'm from Renal Tutorials. So I'm a nephrologist and medical educator based in Melbourne, and I just adore Beck, and I'm so excited to be here.
And the adoration is mutual. So we have come together today because we've been trying to put it into words over literally the whole day. It's now 5 p.m.
Yes, the whole day.
Chatting nonstop.
Yeah.
But I think probably the preface of all of this is Christine and I have the most real, empowering conversations that, I don't know about you, but I just feel like I want everybody to have these moments with Christine that I get, because the way that you leave me after a conversation, whether it's a amazing celebration about something and wanting somebody to expand you from that and not kind of like tall poppy Australian cut you down or like, keep you in your place, or whether it's like a real struggle, something that's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually feel like I can speak to Christine in a way that doesn't deteriorate into me worrying about, have I said something wrong? Is she going to think differently of me now? Is she going to think I'm crazy? For me, I want everyone to, everybody doesn't have an opportunity to be a part of these conversations. And I mean, that's so much of social media, isn't it? Being able to share things that help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like everyone deserves someone like that, but it's quite rare. Like I have that in you as well, and it's so mutual and we talk all the time. But I don't think that you can be that real and honest with everyone in your life. You really have to pick and choose, and in different environments. Even with your partner, I might keep some things, or when I'm at work, certainly there's like parts of us we take different places. And so being real is special and also challenging, right? And there's things that can crop up in terms of things we go through in life, and having someone like yourself, like a really good friend to navigate with, is priceless.
And something you said just then is probably like really key to it that I didn't really pick up on. You have so many special people in your life who you would not trade in for the world, like your partner, your professional colleagues, your friends, otherwise from like different parts of life. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, I do quite a bit of coaching on romantic relationships, and I love to debunk this idea that that your partner should be everything to you. And, if they're not satisfying you in every way or meeting your every single want or need, that they're the wrong person for you. And that's the case for all the different relationships in our life. And like you said, it's rare to have somebody who you can be so vulnerable with and don't feel like you have to be reserved in certain ways with. And I think probably the point is, like my partner and I probably have lots of great conversations that would benefit other people, sure. But I think the stuff that we talk about is just so relevant to so many more people than the people who actually get to have those conversations in their life.
Yes, and we have audiences and that beautiful privilege that you with your coaching business, and I am a medical educator, so I'm working with medical students and junior doctors. So not only do I have my own problems, sometimes anonymously, obviously, I'll bring things to you that I've found interesting, that struggles that junior doctors are having and really we're all having, and we'll have a chat about how we might approach them, right?
Yes.
So it's not just the jobs we do by their nature, we have insight into what other people are struggling with. Yeah.
And I, as a coach, I'm not immune to this concept, and I'm constantly kind of trying to strip back this concept that a consultant is like, they're done, they're perfect, they got it sorted. And so I often take questions to Christine like, oh, how do you handle this? How would you handle this? What's this like? And so having that, for so many people in medicine, we're just in that arrival fallacy of like, when I get to consultant, let alone at like whatever prestige perfect hospital with whatever research you want to be, whatever you're like, and I'll be good then.
Yeah.
So many of us have that concept in our minds, and having someone like you who has it all. Christine has the boxes ticked. Yet she's somebody who offers her like humanity here. So many of us are tempted to be so perfect and polished, and we feel like we need to protect that expert status. And you don't pretend.
No, it's exhausting to pretend. I did pretend for a while. It was exhausting.
We all try.
And I think it's just part of getting older. The older you get, the more authentic you get, because you're like, I'm just tired. I'm so tired of being someone else. Like, it's just time to accept who I am. But I think there's power in that, right? To like, I guess when people see you doing that, and I've certainly got people in my life I look up to, and most of that is authenticity. But authenticity is quite rare. So those people stand out for country miles, don't they? And there's such power in it. So I think it's so exciting what you've decided to do here, because I think that certainly the people who are watching will benefit from seeing us fail, succeed. We don't know yet.
Both at the same time.
Both at the same time. And it's completely normal, and just normalizing that, but also having a place where you can go and bring up those questions, because obviously we'd love to hear from you.
As we talk, we won't often land on answers. And any time that we do land on an answer, it is an opinion from us. Yeah. It is not a right or wrong. And that's going to be so much of the theme that underlies this podcast. There's not a right or wrong. There's not a better or worse. We're all different. And so there's different options and different rights and wrongs for everyone.
Absolutely.
And so nothing we say, we want to be taken as gospel or as some kind of idea that, we know the right answer or the right thing, but it's encouraging these conversations where, we all live in such a difficult, uncertain world and quite a confusing society right now. And especially the hospital has its own specific culture to it, and there's definitely an underlying strong sense of the right things to do, the wrong things to do.
Yes, and trying to navigate that system that you're in. There's hierarchies, there's the system of the hospital, and then there's also this kind of unsaid culture with your immediate peers as well, and which can be so challenging. It's very competitive, and there's all these layers to it. So I think I know that your audience is not just doctors. Obviously, my audience is mainly doctors, so I come at it from that. But I think, doctors struggle with certain things, but also there are extra layers. I think there are extra things that can crop up in your day, like, that can be more challenging than things that apply to every profession. Is that what you see?
Well, yeah, I think even just being able to get to the specifics of the situation and see, recognize other people's situation easily from your perspective, when you can be like, oh yeah, I've been in that situation, it can be a lot easier to apply. the stuff we're talking about. Whereas, you know, if we talk in generalities about some general concept, it can just be hard to see yourself in it. I think there's a lot of value in us being able to speak from this medical perspective and having an understanding of this medical culture. I think when I came into medicine, I really believe that medical culture had some kind of like really strong ethical, patient-centered drive to it. It's really challenging because we've also been told that we need to be professionals. That's a word that really stuck in my mind, being professional in the hospital. And I always found that so, I never quite felt like I was hitting the mark. I always had trouble being like compassionate and authentic and also being professional. And, you know, I also found it difficult to speak up against somebody higher in the hierarchy than me and think that I was being professional. For example, all these things that, you know, we actually want in medical culture. We want people to be able to feel like, to be a professional, you need to speak to your integrity and from your knowledge and not withhold that to fit into the social pressures, the culture of it.
Yeah.
And it's such, I mean, nobody talks about this stuff.
Yeah, no.
And so, I mean,
so
I agree. There's special challenges in medicine, isn't there?
And just that on professionalism, it's like, what is professionalism when it comes to, because I feel like there's being professional and, you know, being reliable, turning up on time, having integrity, all of those things. And then it's kind of like, where is your personality and all that? And like, do you have to leave it behind to be professional? And I think that's confusing, isn't it? It's very confusing. Like, can I fit in here? Because like there's this doctory version of me, and then there's this person who is my home-based version of me, and they could be different. They could be the same. If they're the same, you're probably kind of lucky in a way because everything's all very clear. But I think most of us struggle with that sort of, that we're multiple different people.
And that's, I mean, this is such a good transition to the thing that we wanted to touch on today, like an opportunity for both of us to be vulnerable, I suppose, in that we're kind of breaking the mold, but also like it's no big deal to us because we understand that this doesn't make us not a good doctor. But a lot of people would think, you know, doctors should walk the talk of health. And then we have so many ideas about what that means. You know, a doctor shouldn't be unhealthy, right? That seems ironic, this kind of idea.
Yes.
And so often, like the word balance, I don't know about you, but the word balance just gets like, you just need to live a balanced life and that will solve all of the problems that you have as a busy, ambitious professional, right? Just live a balanced life.
I need a bottle of balance. I would pay a lot of money for that bottle of balance. I don't have any problems, people, but bottle of balance.
there can be so much, like, just to take the smile off my face, there can be a lot of shame. There can be a lot of shame in the idea that you're not being healthy as a doctor. You know, it's almost like a part of your professional integrity. We almost think as doctors we should walk the talk. I mean, that certainly resonates in my mind, like practice what you preach. You're a doctor. Shouldn't you be healthy?
Yeah. And you're not a patient. Like there's the patient and there's you, and they're different. And then you don't identify with those things. Yeah. And you're sort of almost, the construct that you're working in is that you shove it down. If you don't feel quite right for some reason, you shove it down, and you never really give yourself the opportunity in some ways, or the permission to be anything less than that perfect doctor, healthy person to the outside world. And you're sort of encouraged to ignore yourself, which I think is a real danger in our profession.
Yeah. And then it's that you're forced to pretend. You know from yourself that you're not that perfect, balanced person.
Yeah.
You know that you're not always practicing what you preach. But if you believe that you should or you have to, otherwise you're not being a good doctor. Yeah. Think about the price of pretending to do that is high. Isn't it?
Very high.
Sends you in the spin.
It's very high. And I think if I'm being really honest, like my sort of self-care, well-being journey, really tuning into myself happened once I qualified. I think when you're a doctor in training and you're going through it, I don't think I had enough space to just sit still and be like, why do I feel so awful? You know, it wasn't until I was at a crossroads when I was like, I've just become a consultant, but I don't even know if I want to do medicine anymore, that I was able to. It was a journey. So I think, to be fair, like the things that I'm saying about well-being and all that stuff, there's a privilege in that, you know, when you're a consultant, I mean, I don't work clinically full time, just to be fully transparent. I think that it's so challenging when you're on call and you're working a million weekends and your hours are crazy. It's very like that balance. How do your routine's not, you don't have a routine. Yeah.
And Christine made this beautiful video on her channel. It must have been a couple months ago, right? On balance. You were really just talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, the fact that balance is really personal. It's not this cookie cutter, like doctor's prescription of what, I don't know how many minutes of exercise you should get a day, etc.
Yeah.
It really has to be a personal question. But what we really wanted to talk about today is a recent period where we were not balanced and the fact that was totally okay.
It was like last week.
I'm still not back on
I'm gaining equilibrium, rebalancing as we speak. Yeah, same.
Yeah. Because definitely from my perspective as a coach, the problem is when you think it's a problem. The problem I have with balance is not the idea that, you know, we shouldn't be doing more good things to take care of ourselves and what matters to us. The problem is what we make it mean when we're not being balanced, because we think it means that we're not being a good doctor. Not like we're being fake, we're a fraud, we're doing it wrong, we're out of integrity, whatever. And then how that affects you. That's really the problem to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like a standard that you just cannot reach, and the fact that you're not reaching it, you just feel that there's something wrong with you when no one around you is reaching it and no one's talking about it. Yeah.
And that's why we want this is the whole podcast.
Yeah, it's why we're here. It's probably why you're here, Sam. Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it was, I just did a stint where I was overloaded. I was doing a locum job that was taking up my 8 till 5 plus, of course, hours. And then I was working with all my coaching clients, and they so gracefully moved to meet me either before work. So I'd wake up at 5 or 5:30 and coach 1 or 2 people before I went to work. This was Tuesday to Thursday mornings. And then in the evenings, Monday to Thursday evenings, I would be coaching, or I had like guest speaking things as well. And this was just a 3-week period, guys. I would not do this long term, but this is how I survived for the 3 weeks amongst whatever other challenges I had. And, you know, it might have been the fact that I was just doing too much, or it might have been the fact that I think I picked up some kind of virus, but I was sick. I was under the weather when I came home. And I was okay with that. I was like, oh, no wonder, you know, it was hard. I was working hard and I got sick, time to recover. So there I was, taking it easy, rejuvenating, recovering. And then when it got to like day 10 of recovering and not being back at full capacity, I was like, something is wrong. Like, I am doing something wrong. I need to do something to control this. I got to this threshold where, you know, I was like, resting is okay. And then I passed a threshold of like 10 days or whatever it was, where I was like, now I need to be a productivity machine again.
Yes.
Now I should be back to doing like my routines, my exercise at whatever level, blah, blah, blah. Not only did I use that to beat myself up because I wasn't doing it right, but the way I treated myself in that scenario, forcing myself to do things that weren't actually right for me because I should, because it was the healthy thing to do, ironically dragged out my recovery. It made me more tired, forcing myself to do things because balance and health. Yeah. It made me take longer to recover. Yeah. So it's just an example of like not really meeting myself where I was at the time. Yeah. And trying to fit into some prescribed box of what health looks like. Yeah. How long it should take me to recover, for example, and what I should be doing by day 10 or whatever it was. I should be exercising again. I should be meditating again. Yeah. And
Yeah. And I guess when you made that decision, was it that you still woke up on day 10 and felt, you pressed the override button? Or like you literally didn't listen to yourself? Do you think if you had to go back and do it again, would you do it differently?
Oh, the override button. That's such a good concept. I mean, that's gonna like override.
I feel emotional. Nope, override.
It was the override button. 100%. I got impatient with myself. I was not happy with how I was recovering. Yes. I just decided, override. Yeah. I don't care how you feel. I'm gonna force you to feel better. I'm going to force you to do these things that you should be doing.
Yes.
Sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying
Mhm.
that's not helpful. Sometimes you feel tired and you exercise and you feel better. But I know
Mhm.
this about myself by now, guys. Like, I've had enough times of being down and knowing when I'm sick and not, and I
Yeah.
still fell into this trap
Mhm.
of thinking you really should be further along by now. And
Yes.
losing because I believed that.
Yeah. And then I guess in terms of how you arrived there, like in that time, it sounds like you were just, up at 5, going to bed late, you were working full time and doing your other full time job, which is your coaching job, and doing it all. How did your self-care routine, all the things you normally do for your health, how were they going in that period?
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. I didn't even take that into consideration. I decided to sacrifice. Like, I had to prioritize. I had most of my hours in my week taken up by my priorities. I wanted to do both of these jobs. I wasn't willing to give up either of them. I purposely decided that I liked the place I decided about it from. And that's why I only did 3 weeks. But I wouldn't have done it for any longer because it wasn't a sustainable thing.
No.
Part of the process was I had to give up those things that usually, revive me.
Yeah.
So I was only able to exercise. I think I probably got to exercise once a week on average, which is my minimum baseline.
Yeah.
2 is probably the amount that keeps me thriving.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I wasn't getting up and meditating or journaling because sleep was my next priority. After those 2 jobs and the other sort of things I had to do for my coaching business, my next priority was sleep.
Yeah.
That was the next most important thing for me.
Yeah.
So, and then exercise. So I dropped a lot of those things that would have otherwise kept me well throughout that time. And I hadn't even thought about that. Like, I'm kind of almost thinking you didn't handle that well. Like, you didn't have much reserve for that to be able to do that for 3 weeks. So you got sick and you were really tired.
Yeah.
From that 3 weeks of work. But I've also got to think, like, I was sick and run down because I did 3 weeks of work and I didn't do the usual stuff that really fills me back up energy wise.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just 3 weeks of work, it was 3 weeks of work and less fuel almost in the tank.
Yeah, but then that kind of makes me wonder, like, with the benefit of hindsight, you can sort of tune into that. And then I guess it's what you do with that information. So what do you think you would do differently?
My lessons?
Yeah.
Okay, so I actually wouldn't do anything differently from that 3 weeks. I loved the reasons that I was doing. I overfilled my plate. And as I said, I wouldn't do it for more than 3 weeks. But, we have those times in our lives where we push ourselves. And that's totally okay, right? For a limited amount of time. And so the thing that I wanted to change was actually in the recovery period where, I loved my first, I don't remember now, 7 to 10 days where I was like, I'm just going to recover and fill up my cup. I love the way I handled that. I didn't like the way I handled when I got to day 10 and I was like, okay, you should be feeling good by now. You've had 10 days of recovery, so you should be back to normal.
Yeah.
That was the problem. And it's the message of, like, you should be somewhere else. You should be doing better. You should be doing all these health and balance activities. That idea of what I should be doing drove me in the direction that actually wasn't the best thing for me. So that's actually what I would do. I would have gotten to day 10. I would have met myself where I was at and accepted that. I probably would have had to grieve these what I wanted for myself was to be able to work again at my highest capacity.
Yes.
That's what I wanted. And I probably needed to grieve. First, I needed to accept where I was at, and then I needed to grieve my expectations and desires.
Yeah. But then on those expectations and desires, I'm thinking about, as you were talking, I was thinking about self-imposed deadlines and things. So part of you on that day 10, you've given yourself 7 to 10 days to recover. You're okay with that. Somehow today's the day that you've got to magically be better all of a sudden. And I don't know what the appropriate lag period is, but it felt like it wasn't right that day. And then it delayed your recovery. But I'm just wondering if there was a self-imposed deadline where no one's waiting for you to do anything except you, and it's self-imposed, and it's this kind of suffering that we add to ourselves.
Yes.
So, I have that as well. Like, I'll say, I need to put out a YouTube video this week, and no one is looking for my YouTube. No one. I mean, I hope you're looking for it, but. Realistically, if it's tomorrow, or I guess the world is not going to end, but I think we put these self-imposed pressures on ourselves. Was that a feature for you?
Oh, absolutely. This is the thing, isn't it? expectations are an amazing thing. Like
Yeah.
expectations keep us moving
Yeah.
forwards.
Mm-mm.
And I always say this to my clients, like, do not drop your expectations. That's not happening on my watch. You're not going to drop your expectations. That's not the solution here.
Yeah.
The solution here is to look at what your mind does when you don't meet your expectations. Not make it a problem when you don't meet your expectations.
Yes.
You know, like I love my standards that I'm going to I'm going to get back to all the things that are good for me, doing these things when it's good for me. I love that standard. I don't want to get complacent in my rest and not strive to go back to that ideal and that high work output. But the problem was when I hit that day 10 and I was like, I'm not meeting my expectation, and that's a problem. That's a big problem. And then I started this was self-sabotaging.
Oh, the mean girl. Yeah.
You have to, when you have a medical education business and you have your clinical roles as well, you have to have deadline and high expectations of deadlines, don't you?
Yeah, and I think deadlines work really, really well for me. But yeah, I do find I had a similar experience actually when I got out of whack with journaling was the thing. I had this thing in the morning. I was going half an hour walk every day because I was listening to your content and you told me about non-negotiables. So 30-minute walk a day. I mean, I don't try very hard, just round the block. So 30, that seemed like a goal I could reach. And journaling was like my coffee in the morning, journaling. And recently that got out of whack, and I didn't really know what was happening to me. I just knew that I was out of balance and I was feeling like things weren't right. So I was running a live course, then I was doing some ward service in the middle, and I had a sick family member overseas. And so I was doing these like phone calls, like I guess with the time difference first thing in the morning when I would normally journal. And of course, like you, I wouldn't swap out any of that. But with the benefit of like reflection and looking back, I really did get into a state of chaos. Like last week, Beck, I ran out of undies. I had one pair of undies, and I was like,
the washing.
This is a sign of self-neglect. Straight to the laundry, I went. But like that is what happened to me last week, and I didn't really realize it until that happened, and I was like, well, that's a very clarifying moment. Like I need to get back on track, the chaos. And this week I've restored equilibrium to a point. But I think it is good to, when you get the opportunity to when you've come out of one of those periods of imbalance, is to reflect on how you might look after yourself next time, and understand that it's not going to be realistic to do everything, but what are your staples that might just give you comfort and keep you well and keep you sane. Keep your laundry done.
Oh my gosh.
Put in the fridge, sleep. Like I think what you were saying was you went back to the absolute basics. You were like, I'm sleeping. I'm going to sleep. That's my survival mode. And I think there are those real basics that we can get really out of balance with. Or, if you're ordering takeaway for the third night in a row, no judgment at all. Definitely been in those situations. But like that doesn't make me feel very healthy when I do that. And it's sort of a vicious cycle. Like if I'm eating well, I'm doing better. So I think just kind of allowing yourself to be imperfect and not being hard on yourself for falling into that trap. And then being like, right, take stock. What needs to change for me to,
Yeah. Like 3 weeks was my absolute max. If I'd pushed that for one more week, and I certainly would have never made that a long-term plan to go without those things that really fill me up. I would have had to sacrifice something else during that time, or I couldn't make that a longer-term plan. It's really important that we, I think, don't label ourselves. Like we strive for that, to do the things that make us healthy, the things that we preach, but to not label it as a problem when we don't, whether we purposely choose not to do it or whether, we just slip up, we can't, life feels a bit chaotic sometimes. Because the problem is when we do label ourselves, when you're like, it's just like, well, maybe I'm not somebody who really could have a morning routine. Like you say that thought, and then you're not going to get back on your morning routine and be a person who has a morning routine.
True. Although on that note, as someone who strives to have a morning routine, and I haven't quite got the full way of what I would love to have as my morning routine, I think what I've learned recently is that that walk around the block I'm talking about, that's exercise, but it's also out in nature, and it's also good for my mind. And I feel like it clears my mind, and it's like an all-in-one 30 minutes. Anyone can do 30 minutes. But if I set the expectation, which I used to do, I'd be like, oh, like those people go to the gym. I should go to the gym, except I personally hate going to the gym. So I had to like be really honest with myself that that's not my reality, and that actually makes me more stressed out, and it's another thing I have to show up for. Whereas a walk around the block, the barriers to that are fairly minimal. I can put a podcast in, I can listen to music, I can do whatever, I can phone someone.
Yeah.
Like it's this kind of activity that's really easy to integrate. And so I think also being honest with yourself when you are trying to come up with your healthcare plan for yourself or your self-care routine to make it super easy. Low-hanging fruit all the way.
Well, it's the trap again of thinking there's a right way to do it, that there's an ideal way to do it. And, you know, I don't know, you have to read the Heart Foundation guidelines and they're like, you need to do, I don't even know what they are. You need to do 30 minutes of cardiovascular. Like they've simplified it down to something so cookie cutter, which is awesome when like you want to, I don't know, you want a place to start or you do want to generalize.
Yeah.
But if the standard, the box doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work, full stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to trust ourselves that we can trial and error apply something. And if the Heart Foundation guidelines don't produce the effect for us, then we have permission to pivot to what works for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that I've found is a better word than exercise for me is movement. Movement. Part of my self-care routine is movement as opposed to exercise, because it just feels like exercise feels like something other people do really well. So, some of you will be resonating with this. It's unpleasant. You're good, just like trains people to exercise. It's a different side of the couch over here. It truly is.
I'm just sitting over here on my huge biceps. Gym junkie.
Just like, oh God. But just on that though, this is a hard question that probably doesn't have an answer. But I'm just thinking about maybe some of the people who are watching who are working full time, they're feeling frazzled. They're, you know, we've got these sort of times where we've had a difficult phase and we've come through the phase. But for some people, you know, it's a whole year of training is their phase, or 6 months of a rotation, or whatever it is. What would your advice be to them?
Well, I actually asked one of my closest friends, she's a psychiatry registrar at an understaffed hospital, as they all are, I suppose. But, you know, doing lots of overtime, working through her lunch breaks. There was a bit of a commute for a while at the start, and she was just like surviving. And we were kind of having this conversation as well about kind of doing the idealistic health things, because she's very health conscious. She's very mindful, just another superhuman. And we were trying to reflect on that while she was in it, like looking back on the last couple of weeks. Realistically, what would you change? Realistically, looking back on what happened, what would you do differently? And I think we need to be able to first meet the reality of our own situation. I don't think we should start with, they say that I should do movement every day. They say that I should do 30 minutes of exercise every day. Just throw that out. Start with looking at what's actually available to you and look at the last week in your life. Don't look, I don't know, forwards. It's too easy to fantasize and make up some new version of yourself that suddenly gets up at 5 a.m. But look back on the last week and think, what would I have actually changed that would have actually made me feel better today? What could I have done this week that would have actually changed how I feel today? To get out of this kind of fantasy mode of like, it'll be better next week. So I think, you know, as a registrar, you really have multiple jobs. You're not just doing your actual clinical job, you're studying as well. And all the other stuff that comes with being a registrar, whether it's extracurricular research, whatever. You have multiple jobs, and there's no way that somebody else could answer for you what you need to feel better. The only way is to be able to turn into yourself and work out, you know, what is draining me? How can I minimize the stuff that's draining me? What is filling me up? How can I add in stuff that's filling me up within the constraints of my life? You need to be able to honor your own priorities. You know, like I did that 3-week period. I just owned my priorities. I was like, sure, I'm not going to get to exercise more than once a week, but I love my priorities. Like,
Yeah.
I like what I've chosen here.
Yeah.
So you've got to work in a way that doesn't feel like you're sacrificing yourself.
Yeah.
As well.
And that sort of acceptance versus resistance. Beck taught me this superpower as a magic trick when I went to one of your courses. So I went to the Should Lab, and it was really awesome. If you ever do that, I highly recommend it. And one of the sentences she gave me to change thoughts was like, it's totally normal to feel a certain way in any situation. And I think that does apply to that as well. Like, it's normal not to have the best self-care routine in planet Earth when you're doing all those hours. It is normal to not have food in the fridge for all these reasons, right? So I think if you just give yourself permission to be normal and not superhuman, like perfect doctor in every aspect, every facet of your life, it's actually very empowering and it's comforting. I've used that so much since I did your course, because I think it's important to be like, it's okay to be feeling tired today. It's okay to be feeling XYZ today.
Yeah, because the concept there is not, again, like Christine holds high standards for herself.
Yeah.
And accepting whatever has happened in reality as being normal doesn't negate or take away her standards. She still holds them, but normalizing something just stops you from making that more of a problem, like spiraling from it.
Yeah.
When you're like, I don't have food in the fridge, and that means I am failing as a health professional. Yeah. That's a waste of your thought space, your energy, and the spiral of like, however that affects you from there on. Whereas when you actually just meet the reality of like, hey, sometimes health professionals end up without food in their fridge because they prioritize other things, and they love that they prioritize other things.
Yeah.
Then you get to move on to a solution.
That's right. As soon as you
no
stop
drama
downing on yourself, the solution becomes clear, and you don't feel awful about it. You just go and get some food and come back, and like there's no emotional whatever it is we do to ourselves. It feels bad.
What's the solution when you're like, okay, and that means I'm a terrible health professional. Like, okay, well, I'm a terrible health professional and I just need to do, but I don't know. What do you even say?
Right.
You don't even try and solve the problem because you're a terrible health professional.
Like, how many years to retirement? Like, when do I get to chill out? Like, the countdown begins on your little calendar. Yeah.
So I think these kinds of concepts are so important because I don't know about you, but I hear so many people just try and like put themselves in a box because they did XYZ. They can't, like, they don't have this skill. They did this thing wrong. They didn't keep up with their washing. So they are a incompetent, never going to be successful, unorganized human. Like,
Yeah. And I would love personally, I'd love to go into different people's lives that I know that I think they're like my hero. And I'd love to see that they haven't done their laundry today. Yeah. Like, how great would that be?
Does Oprah have an organized wardrobe? Or
I think Oprah has several members of staff. Like,
yeah, that's
yeah. Although I would love to just go over to Oprah's house. Just hang.
We should find out.
We should find out how to do that. Yeah. But yeah, I think everyone is just normal and no one's really that special. Even like celebrities, I'm sure they would say that to you though, that they're just actually a normal person. And that, it's sort of, we have all these standards. But I think that is really like powerful, that conversation about doctors and trying to be healthy, and it ties into so many other things, and we'll probably talk about it in another episode maybe, but I think that kind of reflecting on what you could do differently, kind of we get into realms of like boundaries and overtime and other things. So I can't wait to sort of go on that journey with you. There's so much to talk about.
Yeah, so many great examples to share.
Right.
I mean, this is just the first episode, and as we go along and work out what we're doing, because we said before, we don't have the answers, but we like to ask lots of questions. We will be unpolished and messy at times. It's not supposed to be polished. That's not the goal. But we don't have enough conversations about real life. There's not many spaces in our professional lives, in the hospital corridors, or, even with our partners sometimes, and sometimes your partner's going through, even if your partner's usually a support person in a lot of ways, life is life, and sometimes they're not available. They're having their own stuff and you're supporting them and so on. So we want to be this consistent space for you where you're always welcome to bring your messy human self as well. And we said before, the facade of people who have sort of made it in your mind is not. It's never true, is it?
There's a lot of facade, and I think we do well to, I guess, not break down the facade like the facade is necessary sometimes. It's got a purpose, but I think it just goes a long way to understand that you're not the only one going through what you're going through, or feeling like you don't fit in, or you know,
or struggling.
With, like, yeah.
How do I answer this question? What does this mean? What do I do now?
Yeah, absolutely. Or even struggling with your own facade, that you're well aware that this is who you are at work and there's a different person underneath, and struggling to, it's actually quite exhausting, like we said before, right at the start, to not be authentic. It's exhausting to show up as someone else. And so it's challenging. So
it's a really special space to me. I've benefited from people who have been willing to be authentic with me, usually not on the internet, but just throughout my life. You know, there's moments where people, definitely in the hospital, it's been very rare for people to be vulnerable with you, and we all know how hard vulnerability is. So I'm just really grateful for them. I don't expect other people to necessarily suddenly be vulnerable, but we want to do that for you. We want to do that here. So you always have that option in life.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meg. This is so fun. Thanks for inviting me on.
Fun. This is our new space and creation, and we are so happy that you have joined in, and we'll see you again next week. See you soon. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd.
Oh, look, we've got some people.